Imagine the man who changed the history of music, the most famous face on stage, sitting alone in the bathroom of his own home, with a book about the face of Jesus in his hands, and having no idea this would be the last time he was ever awake. Today, we're going to walk, step by step, through Elvis Presley's final hours at Graceland, what he was feeling, the health problems surrounding him, what he did that night and that morning, how his body was found, and how the world reacted when the clock stopped for the king of rock and roll. And there's something important. In this research, make sure to answer the following questions and include the answers in an organic and natural way in the script we're creating. If you love Elvis, stay with me until the end, because more than talking about death, this video is about humanity, faith, fragility, and legacy. In 1977, Elvis Presley was living a kind of double life. To the public, he was still the king of rock, the man in the white jumpsuit playing sold-out shows, getting standing ovations in Las Vegas, and drawing huge crowds around Graceland. Behind the curtain, however, there was an Elvis who was deeply exhausted, physically weakened, and mentally weighed down by worries, trying to balance the image of an icon with the reality of a 42-year-old man carrying an entire history of excess, pressure, and family loss. From a physical standpoint, more recent studies on his health reveal a much more complex picture than most people imagined at the time. Research into his medical records and family history indicates that Elvis had diseases or dysfunctions in 9 of the 11 systems of the human body, and that at least half of these issues were genetic, meaning they were with him from birth, long before fame. In the Presley family, early deaths were common, especially from heart problems. Elvis inherited this predisposition. He carried a vulnerable heart from a very young age. In the last years of his life, this unfavorable genetic background collided with a brutal lifestyle. Elvis suffered from high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, an enlarged heart, circulation problems, and interruptions in blood flow that left him tired and short of breath. Reports and later medical reviews describe a condition of hypertensive cardiovascular disease with atherosclerosis, the kind of problem that pushes the heart to its limit and opens the door to a fatal heart attack, like the one that took his life in August 1977. Around this weakened heart, there were other serious problems. Elvis had an enlarged and compromised colon, which caused intense abdominal pain and constant discomfort. He was hospitalized multiple times in just the 5 years before his death to treat hypertension and an impacted or dilated colon. And he also lived with mild diabetes, liver changes, and overall digestive difficulties. On top of that came frequent episodes of body pain, back problems, eye issues such as glaucoma, and joint pain, trapping him in a routine of chronic pain that's hard to imagine for anyone who only saw the spotlight and the stage. In practice, what did all of this mean for Elvis in his day-to-day life? A constant fatigue that never went away, shortness of breath, swelling, ongoing malaise, irregular sleep, and the sense that his body could no longer keep up with the size of his commitments. He had to go in and out of hospitals, interrupt tours, reschedule dates, and deal with doctors all the time. For an artist who was used to being seen as almost superhuman, the myth who ignited the pop culture of the 50s and 60s, admitting he was fragile was far more painful than any bad review in the press. One of the cruelest enemies of that phase was insomnia. There are consistent reports that Elvis would spend nights wide awake, pushing through until dawn, only falling asleep when his body simply couldn't take it anymore. His routine was already naturally flipped, sleeping in the morning, living at night, but in the final stretch, that got worse. It was common to find him awake at 4 or 5 in the morning, calling friends, asking his cousin to come over and play racquetball, or just wandering around Graceland looking for some kind of rest that never came. That constant sleep deprivation only made his mood swings, his pain, and especially the state of his heart even worse. Emotionally, things were just as complex as they were physically. Elvis had divorced Priscilla a few years earlier, but he still had a strong emotional bond with her, and especially with his daughter Lisa Marie, whom he loved deeply.
The emotional distance from his ex-wife, the guilt of not being the normal dad who could drive his daughter to school and live a simple life, and the feeling of loneliness under the spotlight weighed heavily on him. Inside Graceland, he was constantly surrounded by people, security guards, cousins, staff, tour friends, and yet he felt more and more isolated. 4.
His relationship with Ginger Alden, his last fiancée, fits into this context as an attempt to rebuild some idea of family and future. Elvis talked about getting married, about new plans, about enjoying a quieter life by her side and with Lisa Marie. In various accounts from people close to him, he would swing between moments of great tenderness, humor, and generosity, and periods of deep introspection, sadness, and discouragement. It's as if he was always oscillating between the desire to start over and the awareness that his body might not give him much more time. Another key aspect for understanding Elvis's emotional state is his spirituality. The king had a deep connection with religious themes from childhood. He loved gospel music, read the Bible, and was drawn to books that mixed faith, science, prophecies, and life after death. In his final months, this spiritual side became even more visible. It's no coincidence that, just hours before he died, he was reading the book The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus, a work that tries to reconcile Christian faith with scientific investigations into the image of Christ. When you picture a global icon, alone in the middle of the night, holding a book about the face of Jesus, you can sense the depth of the inner search he was going through. Serious biographies also point out that he had a strange awareness of his own finiteness. In conversations with friends and members of his team, Elvis mentioned that he didn't think he would live very long. He talked about the string of early deaths in his family and his fear that he wouldn't hold up under the pace he was living. He revised his will in 1977, shortly before he died, reinforcing that Lisa Marie would be his main heir. These gestures, combined with his comments about death and purpose, reveal a man who, even without knowing the exact day and hour, felt he was approaching a limit. At the same time, it's important to remember that Elvis had not given up on life. He was still planning tours, talking about acting in serious films, dreaming of a karate film project, and discussing career changes that might take him away from the exhausting routine of hotel rooms and stage lights. He kept laughing with friends, playing with his daughter, falling in love, sitting at the piano, singing gospel songs in the middle of the night. That mix of hope and exhaustion, faith and fear, plans and premonitions perfectly captures the emotional and physical state of the king in his last months. When we look at all of this together, the sick heart, the systemic problems, the chronic pain, the insomnia, the loneliness in the midst of fame, the spiritual turmoil, and the feeling that time was running out, it becomes easier to understand what was behind the end. A heart attack on August 16, 1977, the result of years of struggle between a fragile body and a life lived permanently at maximum volume. On August 15, 1977, Elvis Presley woke up at Graceland in the late afternoon, around 4 o'clock. For anyone else, that time would have seemed odd. For him, it was normal. For years, his routine had been completely upside down, awake at night, asleep during the day. A tired body, chronic insomnia, and the grind of touring had pushed the King of Rock's internal clock into its own time zone, where the early hours of the morning were the most active part of his day. When he wakes up, Elvis is in his Memphis mansion with two central figures of that stage in his life, his 9-year-old daughter Lisa Marie and his fiancée Ginger Alden. Lisa is staying with her father at Graceland during that period, and that clearly lifts his spirits. He was a deeply loving and protective father, and many accounts highlight how his eyes changed when she was around. The exhausted star would give way to a family man, someone still searching for a bit of normal life inside the most watched house in the United States. The afternoon hours pass inside Graceland with a mood that blends routine and quiet tension. Routine because Elvis talks, walks around the house, discusses shows and plans. Tension because he knows his health isn't good. Even so, his schedule is packed.
The tour that would start in Portland, Maine on the 17th is already organized. The plane is booked, suitcases are being packed by the staff. He gives no sign that he intends to stop. On the contrary, he talks about the upcoming shows as if they were just another chapter in his career. Later that night, Elvis has to keep a medical appointment, a visit to the dentist. Around 10:30 p.m., he and Ginger leave Graceland and head to the office of Dr. Lester Hoffman. Elvis complains of toothaches and discomfort that have been building up. Going to the dentist at night, at such an unusual hour, is another mark of his inverted routine and his effort to avoid crowds in public spaces. The appointment is done, and he returns home the same way he left, surrounded by people, yet isolated by his own fame.
It's already August 16 by the time the car returns to Graceland. Just after midnight, Elvis slows down as he approaches the gates. Fans are waiting outside, as they did every day. He's wearing a dark jacket, a light shirt, and large sunglasses, even in the dark. He waves from the car window. Someone snaps a photo. No one knows it yet, but that image will become the last photograph ever taken of Elvis Presley alive, entering his home. Inside the mansion, the night seems calm to anyone looking from the outside, but for him, it is filled with restlessness. Around 4 in the morning, Elvis picks up the phone and calls his cousin Billy Smith, who is also part of his inner circle. He invites Billy and his wife Jo to come over to the Graceland racquetball complex. For anyone else, it would be a crazy invitation in the middle of the night. For them, it's just another chapter of the King's nocturnal routine: games, conversation, music, and confessions while the rest of the world sleeps. Shortly after 4, Elvis, Billy, and Jo are on the racquetball court. Outside, it's raining. Billy comments that he wishes the rain would stop, maybe joking, maybe genuinely bothered. Elvis, with that blend of humor and mysticism that followed him throughout his life, says something along the lines of, "If you have enough faith, you can stop anything." And the rain, according to those present, really does ease up soon after. Episodes like this feed the image of an Elvis who, in his final hours, was intensely living his spirituality and his belief in signs. After the games, the group moves over to the piano in the same building. It's a decisive moment. This is where the last songs Elvis will ever sing in his life take place. He sits at the piano and plays some of the gospel hymns that were always the emotional foundation of his career. Songs that take him back to childhood, to the churches of the American South, to his first musical experiences. Then he sings "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," a melancholy song about love and farewell. For many fans, it's impossible not to see symbolism here. The man who revolutionized music ends his journey singing a simple, sad, intimate song late at night in front of a tiny audience made up only of people he trusts. Around 5 in the morning, Elvis returns to the main house with Ginger. They go upstairs to the bedroom. The house begins to grow quiet. But for him, the war against sleep continues. The insomnia of recent years is especially cruel at this time. There is still a huge commitment on his schedule. Just a few hours later, he's supposed to travel to kick off another run of shows. Luggage, costumes, the crew, everything depends on the body of a man who, inside, is completely worn out. The following hours, between 5 and 9 in the morning, are marked by a mix of fatigue and restlessness. Elvis tries to rest, talks with Ginger, maybe comments on the upcoming tour, on future plans, on his daughter. There are no big external events, but internally, this is one of the most delicate windows of time. It's the dawn when his body is clearly signaling its limits, while his mind is still working at high speed, fueled by worries, pain, and spiritual thoughts. Around 9:30 in the morning, he makes a simple decision that will become the last conscious act of his life. He gets out of bed, puts on a gold pajama set, picks up a book, and walks to the bathroom. The book is The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus, a work about the scientific search for the face of Christ.
It's not a random choice. This kind of reading had been with Elvis for some time and reveals, again, how deeply he was occupied with themes of faith and transcendence. Before he goes into the bathroom, Ginger makes a half-teasing, half-caring remark, like someone watching over a person with a strange habit. "Don't fall asleep in there while you're reading, okay?" He answers briefly, something like, "I won't," and walks away. These are remembered as the last words Elvis Presley ever spoke. He closes the bathroom door with the book in his hands. On the outside of that door are the bedroom, the hallway, the house, the staff, and his daughter sleeping in another room. On the inside, there is only the man, his exhausted body, his sick heart, and an intimate moment of reading and withdrawal. From there, the clock moves forward in silence. Late morning settles over Graceland. The house's routine begins to pick up. Staff members move around, phone calls are made. Some preparations are still being handled for the trip that, in theory, would happen that same day. Ginger falls back asleep. Lisa Marie is also in her own rhythm, a child who, on that morning, still has no idea that her life is about to change forever. As we move into early afternoon, around 1:30, the timeline reaches its breaking point. Ginger wakes up, notices that Elvis has been gone for a long time, and after a few minutes of unease, decides to go to the bathroom. That's the moment when the story of the last 24 hours at Graceland connects directly with the discovery of his body, the call for an ambulance, the confirmation of the heart attack at the hospital, and the global shock that would follow. When Ginger Alden finally decides to go into the bathroom of the main bedroom at Graceland, it's already past 1:30 in the afternoon on August 16, 1977. Up to that point, nothing seemed dramatic from the outside. Elvis often took a long time in the bathroom, and the house routine went on, with staff moving around, phone calls being made, and preparations underway for the trip that was supposed to carry the King of Rock into yet another string of shows. But that prolonged silence starts to bother her. Ginger wakes up, realizes Elvis hasn't come back to bed, feels uneasy about his absence, and after a few minutes of hesitation, finally walks to the door. When she opens it, she finds the scene that would forever mark the end of Elvis Presley's life. The singer's body is stretched out on the floor, unconscious. He doesn't answer when she calls out, doesn't show any sign of reaction. The immediate impression is that something extremely serious has happened in that most private space of the house, far from the stage, far from the fans, far from the public image the world was used to seeing. In shock, Ginger tries to process what she's seeing for a few seconds, but quickly breaks down and starts shouting for help. Members of the household staff who are at Graceland at that moment rush upstairs. Among them is Joe Esposito, a longtime friend and something like Elvis's right-hand man in managing his career and daily life. Other employees approach. Some try to revive him right there, while others go to get Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, who lives in a house on the same grounds. The mansion, which just a few hours earlier was just the backdrop to another day in the life of an idol, is suddenly transformed into a place of panic and disbelief. Lisa Marie, only 9 years old, notices the commotion. As a child, curious and unaware of the full weight of the situation, she tries to get closer to see what's happening. The adults, recognizing how serious the situation is, do everything they can to quickly move her away from the area. The scene becomes a mix of confusion, rushing footsteps, tears, and overlapping orders. What had been, moments before, a secret trapped within four walls begins to turn into a family tragedy witnessed by everyone present in the house that day. While the group attempts some form of emergency aid, the moment comes when professional help is clearly needed. A call is made to Memphis Emergency Services. The call, logged around 2:30 in the afternoon, describes a man in cardiac arrest or with severe breathing problems at the mansion on Elvis Presley Boulevard. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher sends out an ambulance. For the paramedics climbing into the vehicle, it's just another serious medical call in the city. They have no idea they are on their way to treat the most famous man in Memphis. When the ambulance arrives at Graceland, the medics hurry up the interior staircase of the house. There are too many people in the hallway, nervous, crying, trying to help, and at the same time getting in the way. They find the patient lying on the bathroom floor. At first glance, he's just a middle-aged man, overweight and unconscious. Only after they notice the facial features, the sideburns, and the medallion on his chest do they realize who they're trying to save. It's Elvis Presley. The paramedics check his vital signs. His body is cool in places, his skin is discolored, there's no easily detectable pulse, and his pupils don't react as they should. Everything suggests that his heart has been stopped for some time. Even so, they do what the situation demands. They begin resuscitation maneuvers and rush Elvis to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. Inside the ambulance, the tension is intense. The professionals know that, beyond trying to save a life, they are carrying a kind of historical responsibility. But no matter how hard they work, there are no signs of improvement.
At the hospital, a larger medical team takes over the attempt to revive him. Emergency techniques are applied, quick tests are run, experienced doctors are called in. However, the physical reality is unforgiving. The heart attack that struck Elvis was devastating. His heart, already weakened by years of heart disease, simply cannot return to effective function. After a period of intense efforts, the doctors conclude that there is nothing more they can do. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the official time of death is recorded. The medical documentation and formal statements point to a heart attack as the cause of death, a sudden event linked to the long-standing heart conditions Elvis had carried for years. In that moment, within the walls of the hospital, the news is still a shock restricted to the staff, the family, and his closest circle. Vernon Presley is informed. Ginger, still in shock, has her worst fear confirmed in cold, clinical words. The King of Rock, at 42 years old, is gone. Meanwhile, the outside world continues its normal routine, unaware. Little by little, word begins to reach people who were part of the singer's life. One of the most striking moments is the phone call that young Lisa Marie makes to Linda Thompson, Elvis's ex-girlfriend, trying with a child's vocabulary to describe the scene she saw or heard described. She says, in simple and cutting words, that her father is lying on the carpet, not breathing, essentially suffocated on the rug. That phrase later becomes one of the most painful memories recorded from that day, because it shows the tragedy through the eyes of a daughter who still doesn't fully understand what it means to lose a father forever. The news then starts to escape the walls of Graceland and the hospital corridors, first through local radio, then through national and international news agencies. In a matter of hours, television networks across the United States interrupt their programming to announce that Elvis Presley has died. Headlines begin to appear in newspapers and newscasts. Elvis Presley dies of heart attack in Memphis. King of Rock dead at 42. In Memphis, fans who were used to keeping vigil outside the Graceland gates, hoping for a wave from him, now gather in shock, crying, hugging each other, trying to process the impossible. In the days that follow, the intimate tragedy also becomes a public farewell ritual. Elvis's body is prepared and taken back to Graceland, where it is placed in an open casket for public viewing. The wake draws an astonishing crowd. Tens of thousands of people pack the streets around the mansion, forming a line that stretches for blocks. Fans of all ages, many carrying flowers, photos, letters, guitars, and records, wait for hours under intense heat just to have a few seconds in front of their idol's body. The crowd is so large that the city partially seizes up. Traffic jams, medical emergencies due to fainting, police officers trying to organize the sea of people. The viewing has to be shortened and eventually shut down for safety reasons and to preserve the body in the high temperatures. Even so, the scene is unforgettable. A long line of humanity passing in silence before a man who, for so many years, was synonymous with noise, energy, and explosive performances on stage. On the day of the funeral, a procession loaded with symbolism moves through the streets of Memphis. At the front is the hearse.
Behind it, a line of Cadillacs, many of them white, a visual signature of Elvis's image. Along the sidewalks, thousands of people gather, some throwing flowers, others applauding, many crying quietly. The procession continues to the cemetery, where a more intimate ceremony takes place, reserved for family, friends, and a few famous guests. The story, however, doesn't end there. Shortly afterward, a plot to steal Elvis's body raises serious concerns about the security of the grave. The family and authorities decide to move the remains of Elvis and his mother Gladys to the meditation garden, an inner area of Graceland. There, in the garden of the very house that witnessed so many chapters of his life, Elvis is laid to rest for good. Over the years, the site becomes a place of pilgrimage for fans from all over the world. The global reaction to the king's death is immense. There is mourning in newspapers, on radio stations, and in TV programs. Political leaders make official statements about his impact on culture. Artists from many genres pay tribute, with some interrupting their own shows to sing Elvis songs or dedicating entire performances to his memory. Gradually, people begin to realize that this isn't just the death of a famous singer, but the end of an era. Since then, every year, especially in August, Memphis fills with fans who come to remember that day. Graceland holds candlelight vigils, during which people walk in silence to his grave, carrying photos, notes, and tokens of gratitude. That heart attack, which happened in the most private corner of his home, became a public landmark in the history of music. The discovery of his body in the bathroom, the frantic ambulance ride, the confirmation of death at the hospital, the crowded wake, and the funeral procession all form the final chapter of Elvis Presley's earthly life.
What remains when we examine this story in depth is a sense of contrast. The man who seemed invincible on stage watched his body fail in silence until a sick heart finally stopped. From that point on, the physical figure disappears, but the myth takes up permanent residence in the collective memory. The discovery, the heart attack, and the farewell to the king are not just medical facts and logistical details from a tragic day. They mark the moment when the person Elvis turns, once and for all, into a legend. Almost 5 decades later, Elvis is still filling Graceland, selling records, inspiring bands, and captivating new generations. He left in silence, in the bathroom of his own home, the victim of a heart attack. But the echo of his voice is still heard on every radio, every jukebox, every playlist. Now I want to hear from you, true fans. Which Elvis song has marked your life the most? Tell me in the comments, because his story doesn't end in 1977. It continues every time someone hits play on Can't Help Falling in Love, Suspicious Minds, Love Me Tender, or any other song the King left us. If this video helped you see Elvis not just as an icon, but as a human being, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share it with that friend you know is a hardcore Elvis fan. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Elvis has left the building, but he never left our hearts.